Welcome back to another episode of the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Mudgear Hannibal Race Pro. First time I'm saying that in the podcast. Evan Preparis. So if you haven't heard, we have switched title sponsors. We are now the Mudgear Hannibal Race Pro Team. I'm sure if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you're familiar with Hannibal Race, the race brand that specializes, in the Middle East, Lebanon, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, stuff like that. So finally got a good opportunity and to officially represent their brand. I've been supporting them for years, but now we've got the whole team. So we got 10 athletes on our team. You can still head over to our same website, ctgproteam.com, and check out the some redesigned and updates to the website. And we're officially representing Hannibal Race here in America. And people keep asking me, are they coming to America? Well, there's no plans in the next year, but they do get some value out of us representing their brand worldwide. So hoping to get have more people know about their brand. And if you want to hear more about Hannibal Race, head back and listen to the episodes from January where I had Rachel Waters on, the pre and post race on our trip to Kuwait. All right, joining me, I have Bobby Ross. Bobby, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, man. It's good to be back.
Bobby, I'm always, as I say every time I bring him on, I'm always looking for an excuse to bring you on the podcast because I think you're entertaining. If we don't know Bobby Ross is the filmmaker who does anytime you see something that I produce that looks good, it's Bobby. It's not me. I had literally nothing to do with it. So the OCR Everest documentary was him. OCR America 2, that was him. The reason I got picked for Ninja Warrior for a third time, still him, because I use his content, his footage for the submission videos. And the guy who interviewed me for Ninja Warrior after I got picked was like, man, your submission video was like the best quality we've seen. It's just so good. And they were really excited that I knew and worked with you.
Dude, it's just because I use the new iPhone, man. That's what it is.
Yeah, with what you're carrying, it looks a little more expensive than an iPhone. So before we get started, I wanted to do, I know I'm going to forget to do this at the end of the podcast. I just recorded an episode today on the Always Be Cool podcast, a podcast based out of Kansas City. So make sure you go and head over and listen to them. Always Be Cool podcast. Got 2 guys on there doing the interviews, and they interview a lot of baseball players. So they've actually got like a really impressive lineup of people that they've had on their show. Not sure how I fit in there, but I don't know. They seem to find me interesting, and I really got to give them a shout out because we were having a ton of technical difficulties because I was recording it from work and I don't have Wi-Fi there, so I'm like slaving it off my phone, and my phone starts dying, and my audio is so they're gonna fix it up, but I give them a lot of credit, and I wanted to thank them. Always Be Cool podcast. Make sure you check them out. And then 2, I just finished Tim Kennedy's book. You familiar with Tim Kennedy, Bobby?
No, I don't know who that is.
Tim Kennedy is a special forces guy who was also a professional MMA fighter.
Oh, okay.
So he wrote a book called Scars and Stripes. I just finished listening to it a couple weeks ago. And during it, I was like, wow, like me and him were in the same place at the same time, like 3 or 4 different times. I just thought it was like really crazy how like events lined up. But I've never met him. I don't know him personally. So I shot him an email this morning. I was like, hey, dude, like loved your book. I'm going to give it a 5-star review. Blah, blah, blah. Like here's a couple times we basically crossed paths. And he's a pretty big name, right? And he actually responded to the email, so that was super cool of him. So go pick up Scars and Stripes if you like that book, or if you like, I think if you like his book, you'll like my book, and if you like my book, ultra-ocr Man, you'll like his book because my book is war stories and ultra distance obstacle course racing. His is basically war stories and MMA fighting, and then towards the end of his book, he gets into some of the TV stuff he did. He hosted the show like Hunting Hitler and stuff like that. So he does a lot of cool stuff. Definitely recommend it.
Oh man, that's the next phase in your career evolution, Evan.
I know. Well, Bobby, you need to stop taking paying jobs and just start working with me for free.
I would love to, if they paid.
Yeah. So hopefully we can get something going in the next year or 2.
Oh, we're gonna do some fun stuff. We always do, whether we figure out how to get paid for it or not.
Yeah. So real quick, what have you been up to since we last talked?
Man, I'm just keeping on, man. Just doing regular old guy who holds a camera work, coasting a little bit, nothing big the past few months. And there is some fun, interesting stuff in the future that I can't quite talk about yet, but
All right.
that has got me really excited about what this year holds, and but not ever quite as excited as I am about whatever it is that you're going to wrangle me into doing next.
I like it. I like it. So we brought Bobby on just as I wanted someone to talk to and kind of as I talk through this series of episodes, and I wanted just kind of like another talking head and someone who's got some interesting insight and someone who's not from the world of military and special operations. So this episode, and we might do a couple episodes on this, is about the TV show Special Forces. If you're not familiar with the show, it's on Fox Network. It's also on Hulu, which is where I watched it. And if you're familiar with the TV show The Selection, it's basically the celebrity version of The Selection. So they brought on 16 celebrities, varying degrees of famousness, and they put them through a 10-day special forces-like experience. And there's no prizes. It is just a matter of, sticking it out and finding like internally who has the grit to persevere through special forces-like tests. So I had my dad ask me questions about it before I'd watched the show. The guy who does the intro music, my priest actually, Father Dino, he had asked me questions about it, and I was like, oh, I'll just send you a response. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, I have a lot to say, so why don't we just do a podcast? And then we were talking about it at work. Long story short, here we are. Me and Bob are going to talk about the TV show Special Forces. We're not going to give away major spoilers, but we are going to talk about some of the events they do. And if you watch the TV show, I mean, they essentially show what they're doing at the end of each episode for the next episode. So that's not even really spoilers. But I'm not going to use like names like, oh, this celebrity said this and this celebrity said that. I'm talking about people in general on the show. So if you haven't watched the show, you can listen to this and go watch it. If you have watched the show, I think you'll find value in this. And if you want to watch the show and alternate between this and watching the show, I think that's a great option too. So I think it'll be interesting.
Boy, have I got some thoughts on this show. I am so excited to get started on this, Evan.
All right, so let's get started. So the first thing I thought was really funny right off the bat was when they introduced the cadre, the 4 people running it, there's actually no special forces on there.
No, I know.
So according to the American definition, so there was 2 British guys. One of them is an SAS guy, Special Air Service. So basically the American version of Special Forces, or Delta. And the other one was SBS, which is like the British version of SEALs. And then there was an American Navy SEAL, and then there is a Marine Special Operations dude. So for Special Forces, is a specific term. It means Green Berets. That's what I am. It is not the umbrella term. The umbrella term is Special Operations Forces. So I thought it was funny that the name was misnamed for American audience. I think perhaps in Britain, SAS and SBS may be Special Forces. So I thought that was really funny just right off the bat.
There's so much of this, and this is the very first thing. I'm not jumping ahead when I say that, like, they go a long way into making you believe that everything that they're doing is somehow some sort of like standard procedure. And that is, to me, the very first thing that I'm like, wait a second, like, is there a Green Beret here at all? I didn't even know what the British designations were.
Yeah.
I was like, what's SAS? Like, why have I have to got my phone open to see this?
Yeah, I mean, SAS is we stole their model on a lot of stuff. Like when we took that concept and brought it to America.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
they
were the inspiration for a lot of our specialized units. So the the TV show starts off with them on a train. They're actually in Jordan, which I thought was really interesting that they actually took them out of the country into Jordan. And we have a great relationship with the Jordanian Special Operations units. So it's not necessarily. I was surprised they went to Jordan. If you told me they were going to be in a country in the Middle East, I would not be surprised it's Jordan, just because of the relationship we have with their units.
Yeah, it's also where we shot Mad Max, I think, right?
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. There's apparently a bunch of like made up fabricated vehicles from that movie in 2015 still like strewn about the desert, and they really don't want anyone to shoot there ever again. So that's surprising to me to hear.
Also, the location of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, that's in Petra, Jordan. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. Okay.
Where they keep the Holy Grail. It's actually that like relief work is you can go into that building, but it's only like one room big. There's not like a giant pit and then an old knight telling you to choose wisely.
Oh, well, that's a bummer.
Yeah, I have not been
Right.
there, but I'd like to get there at some point.
Next time.
So the show starts off with them getting like essentially them getting captured on the train and them getting bagged. So they put a bag over her head, which is very similar to SEER training. A lot of this show, you'll hear me talk about it throughout, but a lot of it's inspired by SEER training, survival, escape, resistance, and evasion. And that's when they train you for 2 weeks on how to survive behind enemy lines, kind of like Boy Scouts condensed into 2 weeks, and some wilderness survival. And then they also talk about interrogation and how to deal with that. And then they have you evade the enemy for a couple of days with like people are chasing you and there's dogs and there's like cadre and vehicles trying to find you. And then you eventually have to get captured as part of the training and they put you in a prisoner of war camp and treat you like a pre-OW. It is terrible.
Mm.
It is terrible. So we're going to talk about that a lot because they use inspiration from a lot. One of them is putting bags over your head and depriving you of your senses. So that was pretty accurate. They did have a portion, like one of their first tests is they take them up in a helicopter and have them like fall backwards into the water, and they have to like
Yeah.
maintain a straight posture. And what'd you think of that, Bobby?
I thought that's pretty tame.
Yeah, I mean,
Pretty tame.
so we have similar stuff in the military training, but we typically don't do it out of a helicopter because it's expensive and it takes a long time for one person, right? So if we did something like that, it would just be off of like a tower into water, right? It would be like a plank. So I've never done that off of a helicopter, just falling backwards because it seems like a really stupid way to enter.
Maybe a really stupid way to use the military's resources as well.
Yeah. But we do a lot of tests that test your fear of heights and fear of water. So Ranger School has a water survive or a water confidence course. I think they call it. It was essentially a zip line. You splash in the water and then you come out of the water. You climb like a giant ladder and you go across a balance beam that has, 2 steps up and then 2 steps down.
Mm.
You're like 30 feet up and it's pretty wide. It's probably like 6 inches wide. But you're stepping over this thing and you're pretty high. Like
Yeah.
I would not want to fall. And if you fall, you're going to come in head first. It's going to be a disaster. And then you basically do a Tyrolean traverse, one rope bridge type thing over to a ranger tab, tap it and shout your roster number and fall in. So kind of similar to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the very first thing I thought was striking to me about that was the age and I don't know, it was just striking to me that they had so many untrained people doing stuff. And like as soon as like without giving anything away, if you see someone getting hurt, don't be surprised. Uh,
Yeah, so I'll have some comments on that too. So hurt versus hurting, right? So
yeah.
I think this is Evan's opinion. Because they're celebrities, they gave them an out when there was like a way for them to save face. Like if
Mm-hmm.
they quit, they'd be like, okay, you quit. I'm like, that's part of the show. I can't make it not seem like you quit.
Right.
But the ones who were hurt, I'm using air quotes here, and then were like medically dropped, I'm also using air quotes.
Hmm.
That's like there are few medical drops at selection. There is very few. People will be seriously hurt and they're like, we're not dropping you. Do you quit? And they're like, yeah. So like a lot of people
Right.
they'll be hurting and then they quit versus medically dropped. There's a distinct difference in paperwork when you leave a course. And a lot of
Gotcha.
guys you meet will say, "Oh, I was gonna graduate, but I got hurt." But their paperwork doesn't say they were hurt. Their paperwork says they quit because, it just takes a lot for you to get medically dropped.
Yeah. As it should.
It should, yeah. Because I don't want someone who's going to be like, "Hey, my leg's really hurting on this mission. I just want to, just
Yeah.
pick me up later." It's like,
Like anti-fragility is kind of the point, right? Like, I
yes,
mean, like we don't train, at least, like athletically, like I'm training to be able to deal with that sort of thing partially. I'm training to prevent that sort of thing.
yeah. So
That's why it's weird to me that there's that. Ooh, that's why it's odd to put anybody who's not trained in these sorts of scenarios, even if they are what looks to me as like a fit human, like a younger fit human,
yeah.
like not too much of a strain.
I'm sure they gave them some pointers and some safety tips beforehand. Obviously they're there. Each episode less is 24 hours of time. So you're only seeing an hour worth of what they shot that day,
Hmm.
you know. And then as you know with filmmaking, right, there's a lot of like, oh, okay, you got to redo this. We need this angle. We need this
Yep.
angle. Please exit your vehicle again. Exit your vehicle again. Exit, like
Yeah.
to make sure they get all the angles they need for their content there.
Which you will see a lot of a very particular thing that you do is you frame everything in singles. So you put one person on camera at a time. A lot of stuff gets someone like will fall and you're like, oh, well, we didn't think that would happen. Let's go and redo all of these things. Go stand over there again and
Mm.
then pretend like you said this or like say it with this thing. Now say the opposite of this thing while we're here in case we need it later. There's a lot of like, okay, now say it. Now redo that. So every like one of those sort of like kind of like harsh exchanges has probably been redone several times.
That's very disappointing to hear.
Because you don't have anyone in position, you don't just like stop and get everyone in position all the time. You can't all the time. You've only got a certain number of people behind the camera. So a lot of times when you see like a single, if it gets real close, that didn't happen at the moment it seems like it happened.
Ah, interesting. And then if you think about it, like to capture all those moments, you would need lots of camera people, and then you'd have like camera people in the backs of other shots,
Hmm.
right? There'd be camera people all over the place in the backgrounds of the shots. It'd be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the editing.
So that's a thing to keep in mind. If there is a tense exchange, it's probably the third or fourth time they've had to like move somebody around to get that exchange to happen. So it really undercuts like the moments of real emotional
Mm.
pain sometimes, or sometimes maybe that's probably terrible. Like maybe it's worse because somebody who has like some sort of like trauma is reliving that three or four times. Someone who's not trained, maybe at past their physical peak, like, that's got to be rough. Like
Yeah,
kudos to some of these people for what they're going through.
yeah. All right, so we're gonna keep moving the yeah. Long story short, if and you'll see when they dropped some of them, like quote unquote medically dropped them, they were like dropped for a possible fracture.
Yeah.
Was it fractured or was it not fractured? Right? Like a
Mm.
possible fracture is not like you tell me if it's so
Yeah.
like real training we would not all everyone that basically got medical dropped from the show, we wouldn't have dropped any of those people. There is a thing like you can go to the medical tent for a certain amount of time during the course of Ranger School or selection. And as long as you don't exceed that time, which is like 24 hours, I can't remember what the actual time is, but as long as you don't exceed that time, they'll keep you in the course regardless of almost what your problems are.
Gotcha. How often, so this is, before we move on to the next event, how often is it that somebody will say, like just the elements or the environment will take you out? Because there was
Oh,
some of that too.
yeah, it's huge. And it's not like quite that's what people say. They just quit for whatever reason, right? But if it's super hot or super cold, just existing is painful,
Yeah.
right? Like I mean, you saw it at OCR America too, right? Like just being outside was like, well, this is not comfortable. I'm not even doing anything. I'm just standing here and I'm having a bad time. So yeah, you definitely get that in Ranger School, and I think we talked about it before, but there's a lot of spooning. You have to be very comfortable with your sexuality. So
Yeah.
I mean, I've spent many a nights like hugging another man in security because it was cold. So yeah.
Yeah. What
I,
did you think about the suspension over that? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, my
oh
man.
no. Oh, this we'll get to that in a minute. I did want to
Okay.
talk about what'd you think of the bathrooms? They had like stalls that were only like half covered.
Have you ever been to like a music festival? I mean, come
Okay.
on.
Yeah.
I mean, you're lucky to get that.
So it's not like this at Ranger School anymore, but at the first phase of Ranger School, the toilets, they had like 10, like 20 toilets in a room, 10 on one wall, 10 on another. So you would poop literally staring at another dude pooping. It was the worst. It was the worst. It's like the most awkward. And it's not like, oh, well, I'll just look to the side. No, because they're all lined up. So you're going to look at some other dude pooping. It's the worst. So supposedly they have stalls now. I asked one of my friends, and then I called him weak for putting up stalls in his bathroom.
Oh, I love it. Well, hey, that's a different kind of thing though. It's like you get close to somebody and then it's just like, all right, whatever, man, fire away.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty funny. That brought back some memories. They did use a lot of, again, taking inspiration from SEER with interrogations where they pull you, separate you from the group, and they ask you a bunch of questions, and they try to like expose your weakness or try to get you to expose your own weakness. They'll pull your social media profile offline, and then they'll ask you questions about things you've said in the past, stuff like that.
Oh,
Because it is celebrities, there was a lot less hands-on. So if you go to the actual Sears course, they will physically touch you. Like there was none of that in the show, right? Like
yeah.
it hurts to be at Sears school. I'll just say that. Like it is painful. You know, not like you're gonna come out of there with like, permanent disfigurement or anything like that. But it hurts. Yeah. So
Yeah, rough you up a little bit,
oh yeah.
push you around, make sure you know who's boss.
Yes, 100%. And they will. The other thing, like they didn't threaten the celebrities with things. Like we were specifically threatened with, because they're training you to be a prisoner of war in combat. So they will threaten you with absolutely terrible things that you would theoretically be experienced if you were an actual prisoner of war in combat, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, those threats are
Yeah.
there.
I
Um,
was interested, like I was wanting to ask you about how if there is any basis for the kind of like taking people out and then like looking through their profiles, looking through their past, and then like what would be the reason for doing that? Is that just to make you mentally tougher and get you used to that sort of like questioning, or are they specifically looking for things to use against you or to tear you down with?
Combination of all of the above. So part of SEER school is like you're in a scenario, so you're trying to protect the details of whatever your mission was. So part of that is them, um, you know, getting to know you a little better. Part of it is they want to ask you about maybe some negative things you've done in the past, and then essentially blackmail you into doing other things. Part of
Oh.
it is, so there's a book called The Interrogator, written by a uh, German interrogator from World War II, and he would interrogate people, and people would leave the interrogation and be like, I don't think I told him anything. But he was German's best interrogator. He never used torture because he all he would do is he'd build a lot of rapport, get you talking, and then you wouldn't even realize you were telling secrets.
Oh,
So
wow.
they build a lot of rapport. They can go good cop, bad cop type thing.
Yeah.
So the bad cop's hitting you, he's yelling at you, he's forcing you to do things you don't want to do. And then the good cop is like, hey man, I'm just working here. This is just my job. Let's just sit down, have a cup of coffee, and we can just talk it out. And he'll tell he'll tell you things that he knows from other interrogations, to be like, hey man, like I know all this stuff already. So what you're telling me is not going to be anything big. But he's looking for something very specific. And then the people who are being questioned don't realize they've given away a secret. Yeah,
Oh, whoa. Okay.
yeah. And they speaking of OCR, well, not speaking of OCR, this is an OCR podcast, but they did have them run through like a mini obstacle course at uh in their little compound there, and
Yeah.
that's pretty standard for most military courses. The Nasty Nick is the famous one at Special Forces. The Darby Queen is the famous one at Ranger School. Navy SEALs have one. There's also a SEER obstacle course that no one ever talks about. That is it's actually pretty sketchy. That's probably why they don't talk about it. But it's designed to get you mentally prepared to escape from a prisoner of war camp. So it stresses you like claustrophobia, it stresses heights. It doesn't have like all the safety precautions that you'd see at some other obstacle. Like there's like jagged rocks and stuff around. You're like, did the Army approve this? Like, but apparently they did. But you do obstacle courses at a lot of the actual military training. So that was kind of accurate.
Yeah, I saw they had like monkey bars and they had like a tube and like a water pit.
Yeah. Yeah, similar
Uh,
stuff, testing your fear of claustrophobia, testing your fear of water, stuff like that. So yeah, it's on point. The intent is in the right area.
okay. All right. Well, that's good to know.
The one thing there was a lot of in the show that you won't see in actual military training is crying. There's just like an immense amount of crying. You
Yeah.
just I like the guy. I've seen soldiers cry twice. Once is if someone dies in combat, right? You're mourning over the loss of a friend, or you're at a funeral. And the other time is at the end of SEER school. So after you've been captured for a week, and then you come out and you are no longer captured. Like I've never seen that many grown men cry simultaneously. It was
Oh
like
man.
it's an emotional event. It is wild because the scenario is so immersive. People forget they were like in a training environment. They think like no one really thinks they're behind enemy lines, but like it's so immersive it feels like it, you know?
Yeah, the suffering is real whether or not it's actually the scenario that's playing out.
Correct. Correct.
Oh
There
man.
was, there when I watched the show, I look for the gray individuals, so that's something we use, at actual selection. You want to be a nameless, faceless person in the crowd. You don't you if you're like a top performer, you get picked on. If you're a bottom performer, you get picked on. So you want to be like top third and just kind of skate by without too much attention, positive or negative on you. That's generally how you
Okay.
go through most military courses. That's what you want to do. Yeah.
Dang, yeah, don't be too good. Don't be a goody two shoes. Don't be too strong or too fast.
Yeah. The tallest blade of grass gets cut first,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the one I thought it was cool when they had them line up strongest to weakest just to kind of see where they're at. I thought that was pretty cool. We usually we don't do stuff like that at selection or ranger school because there's just too many people, right? Like I can't line up 200 people. You just don't know that many. But we do peers, right? So at the end of each phase, you highlight who you think is the best person and who you think is the worst person. And they
Oh.
they kind of rack and stack those and some algorithm, and they sometimes if you have enough negative peers, they will tell you failed despite you passing everything else, right?
Oh, really? Because
Yeah.
people don't have confidence in you?
Yep. Sometimes it's rapport based. People don't like you. You're not likable. Sometimes they don't have confidence in you. Sometimes they think you're, skating by, doing the bare minimum. Whatever the reason may be. It basically means that yes, the instructors are evaluating you, but it also means your peers, the other guys in your squad, are also evaluating you at all times. So you can't be. We call it a spotlight ranger, right? You can't be someone who, when they're being evaluated, is suddenly all good and motivated, and then when they're not being evaluated, they're like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not pulling security or anything like that. So
Yeah.
it separates out the people who are not team players.
Yeah. I did think it was fun in the context of the show when they made them do it twice.
Yes, I thought that was very clever. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good uh it helps you to show like all the little great storytelling things like character development
Yeah.
and show like the dynamics of the group in real time because that's something that like you're never just going to like you can't recreate that. So I think that's a moment where it felt very real, especially like in between some things that seems like they weren't very real,
Yeah. And I also
particularly
like
the interactions.
I also liked how, like, I think initially a lot of people line up based off physical attributes, and then as you experience different things, it becomes a lot more mental attribute based as well as physical, right? It's like a combination, and that's really how that's how we look at things when we're selecting people for special operations, right? It you never know who's going to make it to the end. If we knew who's going to make it to the end, we wouldn't bother having a selection. You would just
Right.
take a fitness test and show up. They would do a psych eval. They'd be like, all right, you five are the ones who we're going to take. Everyone else can go home, right? Like that's literally the reason we have selection. You can take guesses based off people's physical fitness and some of their background and their history, who's going to make it, but there's no perfect algorithm, which is why selection processes exist.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So you mentioned briefly the high wire, low wire. So they had them
Yeah.
traverse essentially a high wire, low wire over a very uh, steep or big drop off. What were your thoughts on that?
Man, I was going to ask you because the first thing that I thought was, well, I can absolutely see how fear can take over. But the more I looked at it, it didn't seem like people were flunking for fear. It just looked like that was hard.
Yeah, I'm guessing once you get out to the middle, well, like physics, the middle is going to shake more than the first third and back third, right? Because it's
Yeah.
closer to the anchor points. And I think, if you read my book, Strength and Speed's Guide to Elite Obstacle Course Racing, you would know that on the high wire, low wire, you just slide your feet. You don't step over your feet.
Right.
Because when you slide your feet, you're always in contact with the wire. And some of them were definitely stepping, which, if you miss, then the thing snaps and then you're hanging from your hands and now your legs are flailing. So, yeah, I've never done that specific thing, but there are similar stuff as part of the obstacle course races. So again, it's a part of a larger event in the military selection, and and I don't think it's as long or as high, but again, still testing fear of heights, and yeah, you're not clipped in like they were clipped in on belay. So if they fell, they would have a safety net essentially. But
Yeah. And there was a lot of that looked pretty staged. Uh,
yeah,
it seemed to me like they needed to come up with a story. It was taking a long time. And then they were like, all right, sorry, but you're going to have to throw this.
could be.
Whether you want to or not. Because you would see that their hands came off at the same time as their feet. But it's like if you've ever been through an obstacle course, yeah, I mean, I'm not letting go.
Yes, no, you're not letting
Like,
out. Yeah.
that's not even like something that I had to like train to do. It's that like I don't want to fall down.
Yeah, you're gonna hold on for dear life because you're at that point you're terrified, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't have any much else to say about that. I mean, again,
Yeah.
testing fear of heights, you know, confidence in your equipment. Those are all pretty standard stuff we do in the military. We do rappelling at Ranger School. You do one rope bridge type stuff where you slide across the rope. Yeah, pretty standard stuff. Again, it's the benefit of they don't have to put 200 or 300 people through the course. They're putting 16, which makes you can be a lot more dramatic, and things can take a lot longer
Right.
for most of these events. That's the big difference. They did have them do some sort of combatives type fighting thing where like they ran up and like punched the guy in a suit.
Yeah.
Um, so there's not as much hand-to-hand fighting in military training as I think people imagine. Because my primary weapon is my rifle, and my secondary weapon is usually a sidearm, and then my tertiary weapon is usually a knife, and then my fourth weapon is my hands. So we're 4 levels deep at the point of me using my hands typically.
Right.
Um, so it's not quite as much. In Ranger School, there you do blocks of instruction for hand-to-hand fighting. The first week you're there, I think it was like 2 hours a day. And it's at the beginning of the course, and you have a bunch of students who are about to go through a 2-month-long terrible course, and they're trying not to get hurt. So it's actually pretty
Right.
funny because, again, you want to be the gray man. They're like, hit your battle buddy, like punch him hard. And you're like, dude, don't punch me hard. And it's like, I don't want to be punched hard either. So you're taking people down and you're like giving them body shots with like enough energy to not draw attention to the instructors, but not so much that you hurt your battle buddy.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty funny. So people are like, and because there's really that's not a pass fail event. It's just you can get essentially a negative spot report. They can point something out negative or something or positive that you did there, but that's not like a go no go must complete event. It's just part of training. So a lot of things that are just part of training in those courses like Ranger School, people are just trying to get by. Honestly, they're not even going to be tested on a lot of that stuff. So whatever you pick up is largely on your own personal memory. So,
Yeah. I thought that was another one that felt odd.
mm,
That didn't seem like just carting someone out and saying, "All right, go be angry," was an interesting way to rope that into the storyline of the show and try and move characters forward. But I was super interested in whether or not if that had anything at all to do with special forces training.
yeah. Now at Ranger School, we did do like kind of like I think pugil stick fighting where you line up and they put two people in the ring and you hit each other. I think we did something like that, or maybe it was just like more of sumo base where you're trying to get someone out of the center of the ring type thing. But
Gotcha.
so it's loose. Again, a lot of the stuff has basis. How it plays out on screen is usually not exactly how it plays out in actual training.
Yeah.
So, and they also had they showed some of the food they were eating, and it looks a lot better than the food I ate.
Didn't look bad to me.
Basically, all my military training. Yeah. You don't necessarily eat the meals ready to eat, the meals in a bag at every single meal, but there's a lot of training courses where that's like the majority of your meals, and then you get like call them hot A's, so hot meals from like a chow hall occasionally. So yeah.
Nice.
All right, trucking right along. I think that was through episodes 1 and 2. Um,
Yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else that really stood out to me as far as the way people were reacting, though. Did anything in that second? Because there was a lot of kind of working on people mentally in that episode too.
yeah,
Uh,
I think that, I mean, they have to introduce the characters and the amount of the one thing that's kind of harder on the TV show than it is in real life is there's only 16 people in the show, so you can focus more on individual people. Versus if you go to a course, there's 100, 200, whatever it may be. So there's more people. There's also more instructors, and they have more time. So perhaps it balances out in the end. But with only a few people, they can really deep dive into you personally if they want to. So
yeah. All right. All right. I see
yeah.
that. I feel you.
Some of the candidates or whatever, cadet, whatever we're calling them, we're talking about like missing their kids. I mean, I've heard that excuse 1,000 times. It's the same. I mean, we can change the group of people, but it's the same excuses all the time. Oh,
Yeah.
I gotta leave because I'm missing my kids. It's like, yeah, you don't think I miss my kids? Of course I miss my kids. Like, and oh, I miss my wife, or I miss, you know, insert excuse, right? Someone always has an excuse on why their situation is specific and special and why they need to quit. And if there's always a good reason to quit, you got to find a reason to stay though at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. I mean, that's just like that's every single event that I do with you, man. It's like you always you always do this, like where you're like, okay, cool. Like, I mean, like you can always take one more step. Don't put those sorts of possibilities in your mind.
yeah.
You start dwelling on them and they take you over.
And for me personally, I didn't have kids for some of this training that went through. I've had kids for the last couple of years, but to me, when I go through something hard, I want to be able to go back to my kids and be like, I was having a really hard time, and I didn't think I was going to make it, but I tried anyway, and whether I failed or made it, like to me, that's more important rather than coming home early and spending time with the kids. Being like, I persevered. I want you kids to learn perseverance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally. Like, I mean, you could do a lot to strengthen your kids when you show them the way forward rather than using them as an excuse.
Yes, 100%. They did have a roster board in the like the cadre area. Again, that is real, right? So they do at a lot of courses. They do have like a list of the
Mm,
candidates, and then as people quit or medically dropped, majority of them are quits. They're not medical drops.
yeah.
They cross them off, or if someone's doing particularly bad or particularly good, again, they get highlighted on that board, so people know to look out for them, right? If someone's consistently underperforming, sometimes the cadre will start, essentially trying to get that person to quit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I need to go back. I'm not saying that somebody was using their kids as an excuse because there's a lot of stuff that people go through and it is not the same thing. It is a show for like money or like fame.
Fame,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, fame. So it's like I don't want to like be hard like judging anybody on that show. I'm just
I'll judge. I'll judge.
just saying stuff, like I don't know. I don't know what you're going through. I'm not in this. This is just for entertainment purposes. That was one of the first things they said is like, see what you're made of. Like if you would, this is not actually testing the same thing to me.
Mm,
Like, yeah, you can test a person's toughness, but not what their actual courage is.
true. Yeah.
I don't think, not in this sort of thing anyway.
Yeah. My thing with these things is, if you don't show up, if you're not going to go through with it, right? Like,
Right.
once I show up, the decision's made. Once you step across that start line, the decision's made. Like, it's go time. And I don't care how bad it gets. We're
Yeah.
going to go until the time runs out. I'm carried off the course or it's finished, period. So
Yeah.
they did, the cadre were giving them feedback kind of mid-event, and which you'll get at some courses. Ranger School, you'll get feedback mid-event, and like, Airborne School, Air Assault, and a lot of the military courses. Selection, though, specifically for selection, you don't get feedback, which is one of the things that makes it really hard. Is at no point are they like, "Hey, you guys doing really good," or "Hey, you're doing bad." They just stare at you, scribble in their notebooks, and then continue to stare
Oh
at you.
no.
And Like it mentally obliterates some people. They can't handle it. They can't handle like the no feedback, like positive or negative. It just eats at them. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Dude, that's the worst. Like, I mean, just in my day-to-day life, like some clients will give you tons of feedback, and I always go in saying, I want everything you say, positive, negative. I don't know what kind of job I'm doing if you don't like let me know. Because it's like you want to know if you get called back, right? Like,
Yeah.
what did I do? Can I like fix this for next time? Some people won't let you know. I can, so I get that totally.
Yeah. They were also taking Suburbans between events, like these nice, you know,
Yeah.
air conditioned cars and so they could get some like good footage. But in like real military training, you're either walking or a lot of times they throw you in like the back of like a LMTV. It's like a big truck. So it's like open air truck in the back. It's terrible. It's not comfortable. You're like bouncing around. So
Yeah.
that was a little nicer. Um, and then we the next event was the rollover drill.
Yeah.
So you explained to people what that looked like. You saw part of that one, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of looked to me like it could have been a lot harder, uh, and they made it easier. But it just reminded me of some stories you told me. So what they did was they kind of like lowered a truck into the water, and then or like a Humvee,
Yep.
and then made them wait a certain amount of time before they let go of the wheel and swam up for air. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah, I think it was about 20 seconds. They had to sit there with their hands on the wheel, and then they swam out the back of the submerged Humvee. And I'm sure you didn't see it, but there was probably a diver next to them with air in case they actually severely panicked, and you shove a regulator in their mouth.
Yeah.
I would bet money that's what was off camera.
Oh, it
Um,
was on. You saw it.
oh, was it on camera?
Yeah.
All right. I was
Yeah, they had
watching
it
while
right
while
there.
doing running on the treadmill, so I think I missed some stuff because I'd be sweating all over my phone.
Right.
But yeah, the that event we do rollover drills. I've done them in vehicles on land. I've done like a submerged like helicopter thing where like it dunks you in the water and then you swim out. There's usually a little bit of air actually at the top as part of the safety precaution because we usually don't have divers available.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and like you said, that's very similar to a real life event from my past. Um, which if you've read ultra-ocr, man, it's in there. But one of my lead Humvees essentially drove into a canal on the way to a target, and we had four guys in a vehicle that normally holds five. And when it went under, like about three-quarters of the vehicle filled up with essentially sewage water, and the four guys were like crammed into the only pocket of air in the corner. Um, Pretty crazy story. It's one of the few things that like regularly gives me nightmares. So
Oof.
yeah, I I mentioned it to my wife the other day. I was like, "Oh yeah, I get nightmares about that sometimes." She's like, "You do?" She's like, "How often?" I was like, "I don't know, like once every couple of months." I was like, "But that's normal." She's like, "That's not normal." It's like,
That
I
story.
think that's normal. I'm like, "You don't have reoccurring like terrible dreams?" She's like, "No." I was like, yeah,
Oh,
it's
really?
just a
She
dream. I'm
doesn't.
fine. I wake up, I'm fine. It's not a big deal."
That must be a nice. I don't, mine are about terrible, like terribly mundane things. Like my I have a recurring dream. It's not the only one, but one of them is I gave the valedictory address at my high school and I made a Evil Dead joke. Uh, and some people laughed, but the nightmare is that nobody did, and that would mean I was truly alone.
It's oddly specific. Very, very specific.
You know, you got to be real on these podcasts.
Ah. So the with the submerged Humvee thing, it's a lot like free diving, right? Like if you're gripping the wheel with all of your energy, right, you're burning oxygen and creating more CO2, right?
Right.
So you got to relax. Like something like that, you take a couple of like deep inhales and exhales, slow your breathing, and then you take a couple of like really big exhales before and then one big breath in. So the urge to breathe is a buildup of CO2. It's not the lack of oxygen that's triggering that urge to breathe.
Oh, okay.
So if you
So like
blow out
CO2 in
all
your lungs.
yeah, you blow out all your CO2, and then take a big breath. Like you'll do a little
Trying it
bit.
now.
There is a little bit of danger, right? Because if I do that too many times, like it increases your chance of blacking out, but it also makes it more likely that you'll be able to hold your breath longer. So, you know, I thought the swimming out of the Humvee was interesting, but also unrealistic. So in real life, like I have so much equipment on that like I'm a small guy and my body is like touching every part of the Humvee, right? Because I have a back plate, a front plate, all this
Oh
equipment.
yeah.
I have essentially what is like a mini computer next to me. I have my the two radios, and then I have usually, there's like heavy armored windows. A lot of times it's like I got pencils hanging out, so I can write stuff down, or I got a notepad, and like I got some essentially rippets, which is basically like caffeine. It's like Red Bulls
Yeah.
stashed behind in case I get tired on patrol. I've got food. There's extra ammo. There's just so much crap in the Humvee
Yeah.
that like in the show they're like, oh, just swim out the back. Like in real life, you will literally hit everything on your way out the back, and you will get stuck on almost everything. There's fire extinguishers in your vehicle in case you get set on fire. We did start carrying like mini oxygen bottles, but they were, I don't know. It's like, am I going to be able to reach this in the event of an actual event? And if I am able to reach it, like maybe I should just swim out instead of worrying about the oxygen. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like, could it be useful? Yes. Am I also like worried about carrying a compressed cylinder like in my vehicle a little bit? It seems like, I don't know. I saw Jaws when like they shoot the cylinder and it explodes. Like that
Yeah.
was in my mind. I don't know.
But like how would you get out though? Or how did you get out?
So, I mean, when our guy's vehicle rolled into the canal, they essentially moved to the only pocket of air that they could find, which was in the back corner. Me and my squad leader both ran up. He jumped and tried to access them through the poop water on the bottom. I
Yeah.
jumped on top of the Humvee, and I tried to open the door, except the door is upside down, so the handle is the wrong way because it's an up-down handle. It's not like a normal door handle.
Yeah.
So I tried opening the door twice, essentially doing a single rep max deadlift on this door, and it didn't move. I was deadlifting an immovable object, essentially,
Yeah.
because the lock was closed. Side note, I woke up the next morning, and from the top of my head to the bottom of my hamstrings was sore because
Oh,
I literally put everything I had into these two poles. And when I went for the third pole, they had popped the inside the door open like less than an inch, and I jammed my fingers into the door, like ripped the door open, and I saw like all four of them in the only pocket of air left. And then we pulled them out and we went on the raid. Had one vehicle overwatch the rollover vehicle. My squad leader, who was swimming in the poop water, also went on the raid and was like throwing up in after every room. And it's one of my favorite memories because we were just making fun of him. Because
yeah.
we'd clear a room and we'd look over and he'd be like vomiting and we'd be like, ugh, pull yourself together, man. Be respectable, like totally heartless. That this man literally ate sewage water
To
trying
save
to
your
save his
life.
friends, and we're like making fun of him, like not minutes after it happened. Like it's still
Yeah.
going on. And we're making fun of him as it's happening. So that's like the type of culture that you get in a lot of these combat arms units. That's pretty funny.
But it's like to bring it back into this show, it's just like what they said in one of the episodes, that it's like when you see somebody like kind of like shrinking into their head, like shrinking in on themselves, like you start to brood and feel sorry for yourself. And that's the beginning of the end in like anything.
Yeah.
Like a crazy reality show selection or just any OCR. Like you gotta like stay positive. You got to keep laughing. You can't take yourself too seriously because the pain's going to be there regardless.
Yep, absolutely. At Ranger School selection, there's always at least like one guy in every one of my like squads who was just like a really positive guy, and he would make things funny even when there was nothing to laugh about. Like you're just suffering, and he's still cracking jokes, and it like brings the morale of the whole group up. And then you're like, all right, well this does suck, but let's keep going.
Yeah, the quality of the jokes doesn't even matter, really. It's
It
just
does
that you
not.
keep making them,
And I mean,
as
we
we've
saw
learned.
that Yeah, we saw that. We were repeating the same lines from the other guys about the soup kitchen, bunch of homeless people doing things in Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg's Prius there. And like it wasn't even funny, but we were just repeating it over and over again at that point.
Everything becomes funny if you get tired enough too. So it's like the bar lowers, and then everyone can have their moment of being a really popular dude in high school.
It's true. One thing that was interesting about the show was their celebrities. And I think a lot of them had a harder time dealing with some of the negative people talking to them. Because I don't think as celebrities, I think a lot of them are treated nicer than the average person, in my opinion, right? So, if people are normally treat you like you walk on water and you're, like a special flower, and all of a sudden these cadres show up and they're just treating you like complete garbage. To me, there's a bigger delta there compared to the average civilian who is, is not treated necessarily poorly, but may not be treated great. I think mentally that's a harder adjustment they had to make.
It definitely can be because like there's a reason why like, if you're on like a film set or whatever and you're working with somebody, especially somebody who's being paid a certain amount of money and is like kind of lending your project any sort of credence, you treat them that way so that you get what you need out of them.
Mm.
But in this, what you need out of them is for them to suffer visibly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of probably, I mean, like, I imagine that, you can never see behind the camera. What you see in front of the camera is a carefully fabricated reality based on, the budget carefully is in air quotes there. But it's like, you probably got somebody being super nice right behind the camera too.
Mm.
So I kind of have a theory that they are playing up every moment because they know how to make it, to play into that persona a little bit more. And you could see who didn't get showed, like a couple of the guys who at the point where we are seem to just be like better at this. Nobody's talking to them at all. Like they're not getting interviewed. Nobody cares what they say because they're not making any drama.
Yep.
And they're not
being
good
the gray
at it.
man. They're being the gray man. That's what you want to be.
Yep. And so like that's something you run into all the time with like untrained talent and like in like reality TV or like documentary kind of stuff is that the people who are the most well adjusted are the least interesting to watch. And you go, oh man, I thought that this would be an interesting piece to make because you're really good at what you do. The problem is we're not actually entertained by what you do. We're entertained by watching you suffer. And I thought that over and over again as I was watching it. I'm like, yeah, I wonder where the line is. I wonder who's actually suffering and who's really a good actor.
That's a good question because they're all essentially actors on some level, even the ones who are not overtly acting as their profession.
Yeah, like high performing TV type people.
Yeah. And they were selected for their, in addition to their celebrity status, also for their personalities, right? Like if you have someone who's really dull, they weren't going to be like, all right, you're one of the 16 people we're bringing on TV who's a high performing athlete, but it's just very unemotional and dull.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or even if like, I think about how there is, when you and I are doing stuff, sometimes it can be really difficult to get you to pretend even to be in pain, I'm like, dude, just give me something. Give me something here. And you're just too tough.
I just go silent. Like that's my pain. Like if I'm not talking, I'm in a lot of pain. I'm just, withdrawn into my shelf and just, the battle's inside. You just can't see it.
Right.
Which doesn't make for good TV. We've established this.
Oh, we figured it out. I think I've learned you a little bit. The next time we do something, I think I learned a few tricks.
Okay.
Stuff that's worked.
Okay.
I just annoy the crap out of you, really. It's like I'll get you to talk. I'll get you to break.
They did have a lot of high performing athletes, like Olympians and professional sports people on there. And I think sometimes you'll see some of those people quit and give up, and people are like, oh, but they're an Olympian. How did they must have been through all sorts of tough training. And I think one of the big differences, there's a couple of big differences. one of them it's specialized, right? So like
Yeah.
they are very good at whatever their specific specialty is, and they've been high performing at that for so long at this point. It is, I mean, it is just what they are, right? It's who they are. And you take them out of that comfort zone. And even if what they're doing is physically not as hard, if it's uncomfortable for them and they're not performing like the way they think they should, it becomes mentally really hard.
Yeah.
Um, and then on top of that, right, as an athlete, you go to practice and practice may be awful, but it lasts an hour or two. And then you go back home and you relax and you eat. And then maybe you go do another practice later in the day. You know, it could be hard, another hour or two. And then again, you go back home versus stuff like military selection or military schools. You know, they have you for the next 2 weeks to 2 months or longer. So, right. So that like,
Yeah.
you can't just wait it out. Like, this is it. This is your life. Like, no phone, no TV. You know, you're just sucking.
Yeah.
You're just, you're just sucking. I remember being in, being like around 30 and being in the field. So we're like, I'm in a patrol base in the middle of the night, some random part of North Carolina. I'm eating cold food, like on my rucksack in the middle of the night. It's like 3 a.m. and I'm eating a cold meal that's not good. It's not good for you. Doesn't taste good. And I'm like, man, what am I doing with my life? Like, my friends are in their bed next to their girlfriends or their wives. They're probably going out for a drink later, or maybe they come back from the bar, and like I'm sitting here on someone's rucksack eating cold food. It's like I've made several bad life choices that have brought me to this moment, and you just kind of be like, kind of shake your head, and you're like, whatever.
Well, if you weren't an author, then maybe those stories would be less valuable to you. But I think you intuited that you were going to use them.
I did not intuit that, but
Really? So that was just something that you didn't think all the way through from the beginning. Interesting.
I mean, like I knew it was gonna suck, but it was just like in that moment, you're like, man, this does suck. Like, no wonder why a lot of people quit this. I am not having fun. Um, um,
I empathize.
they did have, so when they quit, they would give up their wristband, and occasionally it seemed like they were about to get, okay, you'd see it from within the group. People would try to talk them back into not like, all right, hey, I'm gonna quit, and they'd be like, no, 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 you should stay, blah blah blah. In my experience, I have never seen that work.
Really?
Yeah, like once people verbalize that they're quitting, in my experience, they've already made that decision long ago. Now it's just public for everyone.
Right. It's
So
something that has like kind of been welling up long enough that by the time
correct.
they verbalize it, it's overtaken them.
Yeah. So even in college, we ran a pledge period, which was again no drinking, is largely physical, mentally taxing. It really helped me prepare for things like Ranger School and selection. And we would have people quit all the time, and a couple times I was in charge, and like I talked people back in. They never stayed.
Mm.
They'd be like, "All right, I'll stick around," and then like within a week they were always gone. If not, it's usually like 24 hours they would be gone. Um, Quitting. The reason when they'd quit, they pull them out of the group. One, because they're out of the course, but two, it's like a virus, right? Like when you're in a squad and people start quitting, people view it as socially acceptable to quit, and
Mm.
it encourages other people to quit. So, in a lot of these military selection courses, when someone quits, they snatch them up right away and they pull them out of the group as fast as possible because they don't want that spreading.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, because if other people are giving up, you're like, oh, well, I made it longer than that, dude. So now it's socially acceptable for me to give up. And it's not. So
Yeah.
the one thing I thought was interesting was when a lot of people would quit, they would be like this emotional goodbye, and they'd be talking to the other candidates, right? And they'd be like, thanks for everything you did, and blah blah blah, and they'd be like, and they'd walk out, and they'd be like, man, I really had an emotional connection, emotional impact. As someone who's been in a lot of courses and watched other people quit, the people who quit had no emotional impact on me. Nothing. Like I don't
Yeah.
remember any of I can't remember any of them. So like I think when people quit, they think they're, if they were there for 33% of the course, they think they've left this emotional impact on the other students or the other candidates, and they don't. Like it, you were the second you walk out and you were no longer part of that group, you're a forgotten memory. I can't remember a single dude that quit from any of my courses. No idea who any of them are.
Oh man.
There's just no impact. Like
Yeah.
you're completely meaningless in the long run. Like I don't remember. I have enough trouble remembering the people I graduated with. The people who quit, ghosts, man. Like I mean, complete ghosts to me. So I
Yeah,
thought that
don't quit.
I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
Dude, what a
Um.
show. So many emotions, like as one of the instructors put it, uh, you were on an emotional roller coaster. Which I thought was a really funny thing for him to say.
Mm,
But
yeah.
afterwards I was like, yeah, I guess anything physically difficult can also be emotionally difficult just by nature of you not being practiced at it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I
It
did think
throws
some
them
of their
into the deep
challenges were
end.
hard because some of them they didn't get any really that we could see. They didn't get any training going into it, and we'll get into that later. Some of the especially in that last episode, which I know you haven't watched yet, but
Mhm.
we actually can't talk about too much in the last episode because it starts getting into like classification stuff that I don't want to try to tiptoe around. Um,
Oh yeah, we want to be able to. Gotcha.
yeah. We'll talk about like one or two more things, and then we'll wrap it up. So we're kind of in the beginning of very early stages of episode 4. If you're watching along as we're talking through this, one of the things I thought was interesting was like the some of the candidates were using the term like triggers for like when they would talk about stuff that upsets them or something. And again, just Evan's opinion. I think that's a bad term to use because when you say trigger, it implies like I have to have a certain reaction to it. Versus like if you use a term like challenge, right? Like yes, that there's certain words or phrases that may upset me, but when I say trigger, I feel like that automatically means I have to respond in a certain way versus like a challenge. Like I can decide how I want to respond to something I don't
Right.
like. Um, it's more of just like I thought the use of that, some of that, their phrasing, some of that semantics were interesting. Um, so I feel like we don't, again, maybe they use it now in the soft community, like in the selection course and stuff, but uh, most of the people I go and work with don't use that. They don't use that phraseology, those terms like that.
Right. Because at the end of the day, like, do you want to be here or not is
Yeah.
kind of it. And yeah, I mean, it could do some psychological damage, but it's probably for most of the people who make it through, it's the same as like muscle damage, right? Like you have to deal with emotionally upsetting things to be able to deal with emotionally upsetting things in the
Yep.
same way as your muscle has to undergo a certain amount of stimulus to be able to grow and adapt. So it's like, yeah, I'm sorry. I know that hurts.
Yeah.
However, we move forward, right? Or we
Right.
don't.
It's progressive overload. Yeah, it works for fitness. It works for, I mean, I'm sure you can relate, right? Like you didn't start off making a documentary, right? You started off doing small clips and building from there and, expanding to different projects. And, the work you do now, I'm sure is much better than what it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, like it's not even the same thing. But it didn't come from just doing the same things. It came from progressively going, all right, this is rough. Like this is scary. This is hard. Um, I don't know that I can do this. And it's like you only grow right at the edge, just like it's always the failure rep.
Yeah.
That's the old adage. I don't know exactly how scientifically true that is, but I know it mentally is true. If you're like, like a friend and I were working out the other day and, he wasn't quite there with the weight. He was scared of the weight. And I'm like, look, part of this is just like mental. Part of it's your nervous system. Why don't you like step out underneath the weight for just like 5 or 10 seconds, and then like rack it again.
Mm.
See how you feel. Wasn't too scary, right? Because you can get underneath this. This is not that much more, it's like right at the edge of your capacity is where all the growth happens, like all of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Completely agree. All
I love
right.
it, man. Reps to failure.
That's right. That's right.
No anti-partial lifting club, right?
They did also do rappel safety fall. So right, so they had, I don't think you haven't watched this part, but they had people
No, but I've done
essentially,
it and I love it.
yeah, they essentially people they purposely fall, and then your safety pulls on the rope and it makes you stop falling. Right? So we actually have done that one. So that one is straight from some of the courses I've been through, where you're showing trust in teammates, you're showing trust in equipment, right? That is completely normal, completely normal training. The one big difference was, in the show they have all these like fancy climbing harnesses. Like most of the military courses, you tie your own seat, so it's just like a length of rope that you've wrapped around your groin, and
Oh my God. Oh,
you
that's
tie it
terrible.
off to the side. Yeah.
Woo! Trust yourself.
Yeah, you got to trust yourself that you tied it correctly, right? And they safety inspect you before you go up and stuff like that. But um, it's definitely a little bit different.
Yeah, that would be a pretty anticlimactic way to lose a promising recruit.
Yeah.
Dude, your knots need some work, but it's not worth dying over or anything, you know?
And they did have people like on some of the falls, they were screaming, right? Like they're like, "Woo!" Like it's a roller coaster. And sometimes you do get that at military schools, and you will get yelled at immediately. Like the first
Really?
airborne school, jumping out of a plane for the first time, almost everyone that leaves the plane is like hooting and hollering, and the instructors are on the drop zone just yelling at people. They're like, "Shut up! Shut up! You're not supposed to be yelling." And people are like, "Woo, yeah." And you
The
know,
enemy knows you're here now.
yeah, the sky is so big, and there's so many people in there, you can't tell who's screaming, right? So
Yeah.
like, you know, just complete lack of military discipline on stuff like that. As but by the second and third and by the end, people are quiet like they're supposed to be. And then when you do it in training, people are quiet. But it was just funny that like hearing people yell on the rappel drop thing. It was very reminiscent of airborne school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, dang, that's good to know. Uh, I don't know for what, but yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny. So we're about halfway through episode 4. We're gonna cut it there for the discussion for now. We will probably do another episode of this. I don't think we'll spill over into a third, because I think, especially the last episode, I have almost no notes for. I was basically taking notes while running and watching the show over the last couple of weeks. So
Yeah, man. You've been running on the treadmill a lot?
I have been. So I mentioned to you beforehand. And I mentioned on the last podcast. I'm training with the Fort Riley Combatives team. So I train martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu type combative stuff like an obnoxious amount every day. I think it's 4.5 hours a day I train,
Oh, man.
spread up into 3 different sessions, and then but like I still have to prep for Ninja Warrior, and I'm still prepping for normal obstacle course racing season when that comes after. So I've been doing mostly treadmill running because it's just a matter of time. Like I come into the office after training in the morning, and I'm like, all right, let me at least knock out a couple miles so my body doesn't forget how to run.
Right. Yeah. How are your tendons and joints doing from all that BJJ and then running?
Uh, you know, um,
A little achy?
yeah, just chronically tired. This I normally take a nap during this time of recording this, but it was worth skipping the nap to talk to you and produce a little more content. Uh, and my arms and shoulders are never really that good. I tend to, when we do BJ, I will tap early and tap often when I feel like my arms in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Um, and when someone tries to give me like a knee bar, I start freaking out because I'm like, I don't hurt my knees. I need those. Like
Yeah.
I need those are very important. So far I've managed to stay largely injury free. It's a little bit achy. And then you can also, once, especially if you have an experienced training partner, they know not to apply pressure super fast. Honestly,
Right.
the scariest part is rolling with someone who is new because they're a lot more jerky, right? So you're more likely to get like elbowed in the face, or they're more likely to, if they know how to do like an actual move, to push down on it too hard instead of gradually increasing pressure, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
you know the majority of people, especially someone who's experienced, it's very controlled. So, but yeah, it's been been exhausting. It's been an exhausting 5 weeks, and we got about three weeks or so left. So
More than halfway.
yeah. So
Well, dang, dude. I wish you good luck with all of your
yeah.
all of your things going on right now until we talk again.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. We'll try to squeeze one more of these in sometime in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, what else you got? Any other plugs or shout outs we need to give Bobby before we let you go?
No, man. I'm just living my good life. Just working.
Sounds
Feeling
good.
good. Feeling good. Getting really excited about getting a PlayStation 5, honestly.
Nice.
I've been saving up. I've been waiting. So that's really the biggest thing in my life right now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Side note, Comic-Con is in a week and a half in Kansas City.
Dang, dude. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
and we did not get picked, by the way. I forgot to tell you.
Oh, well, that's fine.
Less exciting.
Less exciting. That's okay.
But again, I've said this before, like I try stuff all the time and fail all the time, and it's just you got to put yourself out there, and sometimes it pays off big, and sometimes it doesn't. So
Yeah, overnight successes are the people who failed every night until the one night that they were successful.
that's right. That is 100% right. Right. Or like I was saying, the master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried.
Oh, good.
Good one too.
I like that. I'm going to write that down actually right now. That's probably old, but it's really good.
Yeah. So, all right, we're gonna get going. I think that's it. Head over to teamstrengthspeed.com. You can pick up my books. Ultra-OCR Men's up there. You can pick up Leg Mitts. We're still waiting on the larger streams to come in, but everything else is in stock. And if you want to see some of Bobby's content, you can head over to the Strength and Speed page. I think I've got embedded videos on almost all of his stuff. His OCR Everest is on the landing page of teamstrengthspeed.com. It's on the landing page of ultra-ocrman.com, which is the same website. I just have two domains directing you to the same place. Or if you look in my video section, you'll also see links to a lot of the content Bobby's produced. Because anytime he uses me for anything, I embed that link right into my website so people can check it out. And do I want to share this now? I don't know if I want to share this now. I made a connection. You'll be excited about this. I'm not going to say who it is, but I made a connection from one of the original Mortal Kombat characters.
Nuh-uh.
Who's supposed to come on my podcast. And we've been going back and forth trying to find a good date. And when I say a Mortal Kombat character, I'm not the movie, the original game, because they digitized the actors.
Oh, no, too good.
So I'm super excited. I've been trying to line up a date with him. We'll see if it pans out.
Bro, wherever he is, let's just go, let's go.
I think he's in California.
Okay. Let's go film him.
Apparently his brother works for one of my other friends' company in New York. It's a long story. We'll tell that some other time.
Okay, well, we're going to go. People are going to watch the video content that we make with them. That's what's going to happen in California.
All right. Bobby, anything else before we let you go?
No,
all right.
We're good.
Follow Bobby Ross Film. Go to his website. Check him out. Book him for high-paying stuff so we can fund our stupid adventures on the side, please.
I got a pitch for you, or a 9.
Okay.
No, just so you know, if you're looking for pitches, you're looking for ideas, we got them.
Yeah, we do have them. Yeah. All right, Bobby, great talking to you. I will catch up with you later.
See y'all on the flip side.